Welcome back to Gold Derby. I'm Christopher Rosen. I'm pleased to be joined by Susan Lyall, costume designer of many films, including Aaron Sorkin's newest, being The Ricardos, which is in theaters now and on Amazon later this week. Susan, congratulations on the film. Thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So yeah, I wanted to start. I know this is your third film with Aaron as a director. You did Molly's Game and then Chicago 7, obviously, and now this. Can you talk about how your relationship has maybe evolved over those three collaborations and what it felt like to come back for a third time here?
It's very interesting to work with the director repeatedly. It definitely gets easier. It takes a few false starts. Molly's Game was very complex. Actually, so was Trial of Chicago 7, and so was Being the Ricardos. He does seem to write incredibly complex costume films, although he would probably be shocked to hear that. But when I first met on Molly's Game, I met him at the Four Seasons in Los Angeles over lunchtime, and he offered the job in the course of the interview, and I really was shocked by that. And I had, of course, read the script a couple of times, but I hadn't really broken it out into the details of filming. In other words, when I did finally break it down, there were 90 costume changes for Molly Bloom. That's a lot by any standard. The Trial of Chicago 7 is also equally dense and packed with flashbacks, and same with Being the Ricardos. It's a very Sorkinian rhythm of having what you can call the present, and then you tell the story with a series of flashbacks. Initially, I tried to engage Aaron every step of the way, and I realized that he's much more comfortable having you move forward and then bring him your thoughts and ideas and images and let him respond accordingly. It's just a comfort level that he prefers, and I have now learned that. It's taken me it's taken me 3 movies, and I understand exactly now how to do it. And it's writing is his strength, and writing him a little description of what you're thinking of gives him something to write back, to respond to in writing. And I think that's really a very, comfortable place for him. And it's comfortable for me too. I actually quite like that. So I would say that our working relationship has progressed according to, I guess, some kind of divine plan. I don't know. Just it kind of, it can be difficult. It was difficult initially, just trying to find my footing, and then he's a very kind man, so it's really not. It's all there. You need to just find your way, and we did, and I feel it's quite a comfortable relationship without being, in touch constantly over every little decision. It doesn't need to be that. He kind of trusts you as a department head to come forward with all the ideas, the solutions, the answers for anything that comes up in his script. He knows that I will honor everything he says, and then I'm very careful with all the wording. It's all there. Whenever if you want to ask a question, he'll say, just look at the script, and it's in the script, or and he's not wrong. Right. And it just needs sometimes you just need to be reminded, I guess. It is there.
That's great. I mean, I think that I've spoken to a few people on the film, and just in general, it does seem like he does hire really good people and then allows them to do really good work, basically, and that's probably why the movies, I think, are so strong. I do think they're all all of his films are really good. Obviously, I mean, I would say Molly's Game has certainly got some period. It's different kind of period than maybe you wouldn't expect, but it is a little bit of a period, obviously, because it's set somewhat in the recent past, and then Trial of Chicago 7 and now this are all, obviously much more period pieces. So for Being the Ricardos, beyond do you and especially having it be about two of the most famous people of the 20th century, where did you start, I guess, in your research on the costumes? Obviously the film takes place over a short amount of time, but you mentioned, there are flashbacks and stuff as well. So I mean, how did you, what was your process on that front?
Well, initially you have to examine the episodes that are being portrayed in the show, which I watched dozens of times each, and would freeze frame and know exactly where I am in this story, meaning what clip are we showing? We're showing this clip. So we would recreate it, pearl by pearl on every earring. And we would also we would also be careful of how it would film in black and white versus color. And so that's kind of straightforward. You really just look and recreate. And it has all kinds of logistics and managerial things you have to deal with. If you have to make the fabric, you need a lot of lead time. If these are the things, you have to think about well in advance, but there's no question what the design will be. It's going to be a recreation of that black and white image. Then there's the rest of the movie, which is their life, and their life that is the undocumented life, meaning not the glamour photos, not the stills and the footage from I Love Lucy and from Lucy's countless movies, but really what their life was like at home. And this to me was very, very interesting, and really what I felt the film intended to examine, and in fact does really well. So what are they like when they're at home or when they are rehearsing? The behind the scenes is super important in this. And, behind the scenes is anything but behind the scenes these days. Everything, there's everything, every social media, every chance to show behind the scenes is really, it's as much behind the scenes as it is the scene, frankly. But in that moment, there was not a lot of behind the scenes, and they were very careful, probably, or they wouldn't think people were interested, frankly, to see them, without their makeup or just working. There was very little evidence of that, meaning photographic evidence. There's a little bit, but even that is pretty stylized, meaning everyone is aware there's a photographer in the room, and the women are made up and so on. So they must have known. So trying to find what it would be like to sit at the table read, or be in dress rehearsal or camera rehearsal, and imagine that was the interesting element for me. And I came up with my look for her based on reading her biography and many articles and other sources. Once you take a deep dive, you could be in there a long time. And of course, the actors all brought their research and their insights. Javier is an expert in Desi, and Nicole is an expert in Lucille, and Nina Arianda is an expert in Vivian, and so on. Everyone, J.K. Simmons was, very interested in Fred's high-waisted trousers and how they sat a certain way, and how we had to pat him a little bit to sort of give him that posture. He's a very fit man.
Yeah.
And William Frawley was not a very fit man. So these are the things that we sort of played with that give us the surface appearance, and that contribute, I think, tremendously to the emotional delivery of the performance.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that about like JK. I was like watching it. I'm like, oh, he doesn't look like it is. It's amazing that the high-waisted pants is a whole new look, because he is a very fit man. Like you said, I've seen like he's it's just very funny. You mentioned, I wanted to ask you a couple of one costume I loved, or it's a key scene in the film for Vivian Vance, is when she has that dress on and like is like going into wardrobe to maybe try to wear a different dress on the show, because obviously Ethel was like much more matronly, let's say, or not as like vivacious as Vivian was in real life. And the movie does a great job of showing that. Can you talk a little about like finding that specific, like that look for her in that scene? Because I found that dress, like, it's so elegant, but it's not like over the top, I guess. And I thought that was like a really great touch, where it just is like, it makes it even feel like a little more, I don't know if tragic's the right word or whatever, but like if she just wants to look like a very, very nice, and like not able to on the show. So I guess, can you talk a little about like that dress? And I thought that was a great scene.
I think tragic is the right word, actually.
Great.
I mean, as you were asking that, I was saying to myself, it was tragic.
Yeah.
And you said it. Anyway, I think that what was important was that when you saw it, you would immediately know there's no way she's going to get to wear that, because not because it's outrageous, but because it looks too nice on her, and also because of the color. Because that color is nowhere else. It's the only place in the movie that it's featured. And I kind of have a red dress theory, meaning every movie has its red dress, which just means it doesn't have to actually be a red dress, but there's always some costume that becomes kind of the costume that takes far more time and effort and thought than it should. And this is not that, it's just literally the red dress. So if you know what I'm saying, like in the Trial of Chicago 7, Abby Hoffman's flag shirt took an incredible amount of thought and effort to pull together, and back and forth and discussion of where to wear it, how to wear it. It just went on, and ultimately it was in the right place. But so it was the red dress. Yeah, I think you know what I'm saying. So I just kind of like that it was figuratively, it was the one dress. It was really the dress right away. We knew it right away. It was far too exposed, and elegant, and it was an evening dress that no one would wear to someone's house for dinner. It was just silly that she could even entertain that idea. And of course, Lucille just put the kibosh on it right away. I can tell you that that Nina, it was exciting for her to actually do it too. The whole thing kind of just fed into the verisimilitude of the scene, which is, her other costumes, her costumes as Ethel are not flattering particularly, or not that interesting. And then, you see her in that red elegant dress, and then you see her in the actual costume, which is the black and white skirt that looks like a little girl's party dress or something. I mean, it is a real come down. So it was a lot of fun to do it. And then it was also sort of quite sad when you saw what she actually did wear. It's a kind of a come down.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. And I think that, like right there, like that's a great example of like being able to storytell with the costuming. I think it's really great. And it's like, you just get so much out of it from even with very little like said, right? And in between them, I just think that's great. So you mentioned like your theory of the red dress and like the Abby Hoffman flag shirt being what was on this film? What was like the complicated costume that you were like, oh boy, how are we going to get this right?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that when I pulled that out, when I gave the little story. And I would say that perhaps the costume that took the most thought and back and forth, it was never a question of where it would be used or anything like that, but the blouse that she wears in the episode of Fred and Ethel Fight is seen both in black and white and in color, right? And in analyzing the footage and determining the color and the shape of the squiggles and everything, it took so much thought and time and working with a textile artist to figure out the scale and the shape and running tests of it. And then, okay, we agree on all of the scale of the little patterns. And then we tried to choose the color. And that became, so many shades of blue, so many shades of green, so many shades of fuchsia and purple, and testing samples and showing them to the production designer, John Huttman, and then to the cinematographer, and then back and forth about what would work best on the set and running a few more samples. It's just one of those things, right? So finally that decision is made and the fabric is produced, the yardage is created, the blouse is recreated, and then there's the placement of the sequins and the beads and how many types, and it was just always a decision had to be made, it seemed, for weeks every day over something about that blouse. So maybe that was the actual red dress, but it wasn't really a question of when it would be used or how it would be used. That we knew it was going to be used there. It was just one of those things that had to be recreated and had multiple steps.
Right. I want to ask you too, another part, you mentioned like the flashback structure. So obviously, but there's also the framing device of the film where you have these like present day, I guess, or how did you guys think of that and how you dress like the Lucy writers as they're older looking back? I would like, what were those conversations like? Because it's not, I don't think it's dated in the film, but obviously they're like, you could gauge by how old they are in the movie versus how old they are in the footage. So yeah, like what was that conversation like, I guess?
You can imagine, first of all, Aaron doesn't differentiate between the present and maybe 1995.
Right.
Kind of one, it's all the same. So with that in mind, the writers as their older selves, you were kind of just a neutral recent past. In reality, they probably would have been 1990 perhaps. Yeah. And their costume is so neutrally, and that's very intentional. There's nothing that can really date them except within a 25-year period. It's women's clothing is much more identifiable with that, and Linda Lavin has some slightly excessive shoulder pads, and that was intentional, but it could work. It was fine. I thought it just showed her as a older woman, maybe wearing something was a little bit older or something. It wasn't really. It was. I don't know. There must be a way to express that, but it's sort of neutral past.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're very right, because it is like, it's the past. It's not obviously like today, but you don't have it, like, it does work. Like you said, like it could be 1990, 1995, it's like, it is very, and like, yeah, I just think that works so well. But it's great hearing you talk about that, because I was like, oh, I wonder what she thought of for those costumes, because like, they're not like distracting. They're not like distracting costumes. You know what I mean? It's not like they're not the focal point of those, or the point of those scenes, but it's like, it is interesting to think of like how you guys thought of that. So yeah, I think that's cool.
And we did tie the costume to the way they dressed in the 50s. How does that person evolve 40 years later? And so I felt we were fairly true to that. And you certainly get it in the dialogue. Jess Oppenheimer is speaking the same way. He keeps saying, what you got to understand. Yeah. He says it in the past and he says it in the present, and he always wore a jacket, and he was always well dressed because he was the showrunner, he was the boss, and that was, we just carried that through. And I thought that, I did the same the same kind of thing for both of the other writers. Jake Lacey's character was sort of the more creative dresser, and I don't know, a little more artsy and a little less corporate. And I felt that the same thing was portrayed in his older self. So it's like everything, it's thought out. It's not didn't just land there. They didn't just walk in with their own clothes. They had fittings, we collected, we tried things, we altered things, and they sat down in that director's chair. And
yeah, it's
yeah.
Yeah, and that's amazing. It's really great. And it's like, I love, yeah, I think that's so cool. It's just things you notice in the movie, and like, oh, like thinking about all the decisions that were made just to get to that point, even for like a smaller, like for not like the main, like you said, like not like the recreations or anything. It's really cool. I think that's like,
well, it also is the opening scene of the movie,
right?
So they are front and center right away, and so it is impactful. And yeah, it was, Aaron understood those costumes very well. There was no issue at all.
Yeah. It's great. And one last thing, so you've worked, I mean, like if for people watching this, Susan has worked with like a bunch of great filmmakers, and a bunch of great movies, like Jodie Foster, Steven Soderbergh. I know your resume is incredibly impressive. I was looking before we started, and I know you did costumes for Empire Records, which is a personal favorite of mine. And I wanted to ask you about that, just because like I think those costumes are so iconic, and the poster and everything, and the the Liv Tyler sweater and Ethan Embry shirt. I feel like those are things that have withstood the test of cultural time. Like people would easily be able to identify them now. And I guess as a costume designer, is that like the ultimate like reward to have the costumes like have that kind of stickiness and staying power in the culture like that?
It is very rewarding. It's unfortunate it takes 20, 25 years before it materializes, but some costumes in some movies are right away super popular and become Halloween costumes. But I hear that these are often Halloween costumes now. And I also know that there are screenings, and particularly recently its 25th anniversary, where people show up and sing along and dress up like the characters. And it is deeply gratifying. And also when people learn that I've done that film, much like yourself, if there's a certain fan base that just, they get all glassy eyed. This was the most important movie. And it's just so wonderful. When you're working on the film, you have no idea that that's going to happen, by the way, that you can't know that it's going to strike that kind of cultural note. I will say that at the time, I felt very connected to it all because I was a little bit older than those people themselves. It wasn't my distant past. There is something to that when you can really connect with the characters because you're just post-college yourself, kind of. And I was very familiar with the music scene and record stores and everything, spent plenty of time in them myself, and really enjoyed it. And there are so many little Easter eggs in there that if I told you about them, well, maybe I'll tell you when we go off camera.
Okay. Yeah.
Just, there's some good ones in there.
Yeah. It's a great film. And I think like it's definitely a Gen X, like people, I feel like like a lot of people grew up like myself. I was like, oh, this is a great movie. And the costumes are just iconic, I would say. So they're great. And being Ricardo's work is incredible as well. Susan Lyall, thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you.